G'day legends, I hope that you're really well. Now, if you've just seen me before this, I've realised that I'm running out of thumbnail photos, and it is like the most cringy thing of all time to try and film. Maybe or maybe not, I'll put some footage over this, but I don't want to seem too repetitive on the clickbaity thumbnails we have to do on this platform to get anywhere. Anyway, let's jump into today's video and talk about Ukraine. So over the past 24 hours, we have seen a lot go on. There's been a lot of talk about peace deals, some stuff from within NATO. We'll definitely go over that, as well as some missile strikes pretty much in the west of the country as well. And then, of course, a look over the maps and a talk about any bits and pieces that pop up in between. Now, a number of missiles were fired deep into Ukraine last night. Interestingly, deep into Lviv and Lutsk as well, also in Dnipro. Now, Ukrainian sources say that 28 various type of cruise missiles were fired and a total of 16 were shot down. Now, very little footage from phone or security cameras comes out anymore of these missiles coming in or the air defense then engaging, as people have been getting detained for releasing this footage. So one, it can show where the air defense is located, and it can also give a BDA, being a battle damage assessment, for what was actually hit and what the destruction damage was from there. But some footage has come out. Now, I can't show any of this on YouTube, but let's have a look here. So this is reportedly in Dnipro. So right here, we can hear the motor of one of these missiles coming in, and there's a strike. Now, in that video, which there's a link somewhere to my Telegram, there are 4 main strikes within that. Now, reportedly all in Dnipro, and from people saying the noise, you see it, and then the sound wave coming, he's filming from about a kilometre away. Now, the part that is extremely concerning about this footage is it shows an absolute distinct lack of any air defense. Now, I think on the first one striking, you can see something maybe, or it could just be something coming out of the explosion as well. I'm not super sure, but there is absolutely a lack of that. Now, of course, we don't have a 10-minute long video of these coming over territory. You never have that. You never have everything you'd like, but hitting in a densely populated area like this, it is very concerning that there seems to be very little or no air defense working there. And we know air defense has been one of Ukraine's top priorities from the beginning of the war. Now, we have seen a Challenger 2 for one of the first time. So we have this photograph here, and people are quick to point out that it seems to have a cope cage on top. The whole idea, I think, of the cope cage is really good. I think the idea is great. I think the naming of cope cage was really fucking silly. Is something like this going to stop a top attack weapon artillery? No. Is that what it's made for? No. What it's made for is see that these hatches on the top, the cupolas are open. This tank is basically useless if a $300 drone can drop a grenade down one of those hatches. So something like this with just your chicken wire, or whatever you call it here, completely stops from that. And I think we will see more and more development. Now, you can make this out of chicken wire and some steel. So, of course, the Western militaries will go away, pay fucking General Dynamics $50 billion to develop the same thing out of fucking 3D printed titanium fucking something that we have to dig out of the ground. But either way, we will see more and more of this as drones are coming into play. Drones are incredibly effective, incredibly cheap. We've talked about that so much. So I think the whole idea of the cope cage is really good. The people calling it cope cage, I think, is very silly. And then this machine gun here, that can still engage. I'd happily shoot that through that bloody chicken wire. Like, it might throw some sparks, but if it was desperate, you'd do it. It's not going to stop anything there. It's not going to impede. Like, these tanks are like 60 tons. Trust me, this isn't going to have any effect on how this operates. Yeah, it may make it a little bit taller. Not going to matter. So it's a good idea. It's just people adapting and overcoming. And same thing, we saw this on the Russian tanks, same thing on the Ukrainian ones. Now, people said this is photoshopped here. Now, it maybe, I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter. But this isn't Photoshop. This is just blurring out the background, so it cannot be geolocated. The big thing that has happened online over the past 16-ish hours, and this has caused quite a bloody stir, is that Stian Jensen, now it's going to be pronounced shockingly, I apologise, but he's the NATO Secretary General's Chief of Staff, has suggested that Ukraine could exchange territory for NATO membership. Now, as JC has written on my Telegram, this is going to go over like a turd in a punch bowl. So a Norwegian outlet was the one that picked it up and reported on it. So let's go over what was said there, and then we'll go over what some Ukrainian officials have said about this as well. So open to Ukraine ceding territory to exchange for NATO membership. The NATO Chief of Staff, Stian Jensen, suggests that Ukraine may gain NATO membership in exchange for giving up some territory to Russia, and this may be part of the end of the war in Ukraine. I think that a solution could be for Ukraine to give up some territory and get NATO membership in return. This was on a panel in Arendal on Tuesday morning. Now, he's the Chief of Staff NATO Secretary for Jens Stoltenberg, who we've talked about a lot. Although the Secretary General has consistently said that it must be up to Ukraine to decide both the time and terms for any negotiations with Russia to end then the occupation. He said it is important we discuss our way through this. As he clarifies, Stoltenberg has previously said it must be up to Ukraine to decide when and on what terms they want to negotiate. There is significant movement in the question of future NATO membership for Ukraine. It is in everyone's interest that the war does not repeat itself again. Now, before we move on, let's have a look at what a Ukrainian official has said about this. Now, this is Mikhailo Podolyak, of course, the advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky. So he has put this then on his personal Twitter. Trading territory for a NATO umbrella, it is ridiculous. That means deliberately choosing the defeat of democracy, encouraging a global criminal, preserving the Russian regime, destroying international law, and passing the war on to other generations. After all, why should Russia voluntarily abandon provocations, hybrids, and traditional behavior without losing? Obviously, if Putin does not suffer a crushing defeat, the political regime in Russia does not change, and the war criminals are not punished. The war will definitely return with Russia's appetite for more, attempts to preserve the world order and establish a bad peace. Though, let's be honest, Putin's triumph will not bring peace to the world, but it will bring both dishonor and war. This applies to any format of a new division of Europe, including under the NATO umbrella. Then why propose the scenario of a freeze, so desired by Russia? Instead of speeding up the supply of weapons, murderers should not be encouraged by appalling indulgences. So something very interesting in this is, of course, it must be up to Ukraine to decide when and on what terms they want to negotiate. Now, like it or not, Ukraine may be holding the steering wheel, but NATO is ultimately in the driver's seat of this conflict, with Ukraine almost entirely relying on Western weapons, ammunition, and training. The West can decide somewhat the outcome of this war and where it goes. As unfair as that may be, or may not be, it is the truth. Now, should Ukraine have to cede any land to Russia? No, and I don't think many are endorsing that or pushing for that, but more discussing potential possible other outcomes. I think a lot of this is coming now that the long-awaited, highly anticipated counteroffensive has returned slow and costly gains well below what at least was anticipated. Now, have we seen the main body of this counteroffensive yet? I don't believe so, but if an area hasn't been found yet to push the main body through, then we may not actually see that main body come in until an area is found, if it is found. Now, Ukraine should not be forced to make unjust sacrifices just to please the media or some pricks with stripes on their shoulders. And what I mean by that is if Ukraine hasn't found an area yet to launch that main effort push through, they shouldn't have to launch an unsatisfactory counteroffensive of that main body just to please some people, as I said, in the media or with stripes on their shoulders. But there is an argument to be had in, is the sacrifice of a percentage of land worth ending the war sooner and the benefits of entering NATO, starting to rebuild the economy, saving thousands of lives, bringing refugees back into Ukraine and then rebuilding the country? Does that outweigh giving up a bit of land? Now, the longer the war continues, each one of these is going to become harder and harder to achieve wherever and whenever this war ends. And all wars come to an end at some point. So is NATO membership and the future security guarantees worth this concession? Well, as Jensen says, it's up to the Ukrainians to decide. But this, of course, is an impossible decision. While many of your people are in occupied areas, tens of thousands have died defending these areas, a large chunk of land and access to the Black Sea is gone, and it is giving the aggressing country the right to come in and land grab and succeed. I think Russia would definitely see that as a win. And what precedent does this send for the rest of the world? That powers can come into another country, land grab, and then keep that bit of land. So there's some very interesting dynamics at work here. But the question does need to also be asked, if Putin actually believes he can continue this war and win, that Russia may not be open for a negotiation like that either. We're assuming that Russia would accept that because NATO is not going to involve themselves directly into this conflict. So as trendy as it may be to not involve Russia in any negotiations, any sit-downs, at the end of the day, they will have to be invited to the table for this, whether it's Putin, whether it's someone else. Either way, Russia's going to have to be part of the process whenever this war ends, and we'd have no idea. None of us have a crystal ball to see. It's not up to people like us, people on Twitter, whatever, to make these decisions. It's up to, of course, the Ukrainian government, the people of Ukraine, and, of course, NATO and the support there as well. So I have no idea where this is going to go, but it has received a lot of criticism. Now, Ukraine has warned of another nuclear false flag attack. Now, this comes from Sarah Cirillo, who, of course, works for the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, releasing information, and Ukraine's National Resistance Center. Now, let's watch the video here. Now, I could not actually download this for some reason, so we're just going to watch it on then Twitter
August
here.
15th, 2023. This is Sergeant Sarah Ashton Cirillo of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, coming to you with breaking news from the Territorial Defense Forces media studios in Kyiv. We are live with reports that Ukraine's Center for National Resistance has obtained documents that indicate Russia plans a false flag attack on the Kursk nuclear power plant. In addition, it is only planning to evacuate a certain number of the residents of Kursk. The Kremlin is picking and choosing who to take out prior to its own attack on the nuclear power plant. In addition, in seeing what has happened in Lviv and the west of Ukraine, we have to realize that Russia's provocations with the Kursk nuclear power plant, with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and its attempt to escalate hostilities against NATO countries simply leave NATO with no choice but their need to respond to any provocation from Russia, as well as closing their borders with Russia and Belarus.
So saying here that if there is further provocation, that NATO will be left with no choice but to then close those borders. Now, let's have a look at where the Kursk nuclear power plant actually is. So I'm guessing this is it, nuclear power plant Kursaka. So let's have a look here. Here's Kursk, and it sits off Ukrainian's northeastern border. So we're going to go over what Ukraine's National Resistance Center said as well. So these are the documents here, and I do have these then translated across. The occupiers are planning a provocation at the Kursk nuclear power plant and are preparing to evacuate the local population. In total, 21,000 of 57,000 people are planned to be evacuated, despite the fact that the population in the region is more than 1 million people. Kursk itself is 435,000. It is about 5% of the population of the regions, which indicates that those who are on the list were selected. In particular, people are planned to be transported from Kursk to its surroundings to the north of the region into the following settlements. So then it has these documents here, which have said to be obtained. Now, this is from the government of the Kursk region. I'm sending you to extract the plan of evacuation measures of the Kursk region, the evacuation of the population, material and cultural values from the zones of possible dangers of the territory of the city of Kursk, to be evacuated from the area of possible severe damage, 21,610 people to the territory. And I'll post these full documents online as well if you'd like to have a full read over these, as I won't bore you reading them here, but they talk about the carry out the necessary calculations of the evacuation of the population, material and cultural values by foot, road and rail transport from the zone of possible severe destruction and the zone of possible radiation contamination to safe areas of the Kursk region, in accordance with the explanatory note to the plan of evacuation measures of the city of Kursk, approved under UMERCOM. This goes back to the imminent warnings we got similar to this from President Zelensky about the ZNPP in June. Now, the Kyiv Independent has reported the provocation is part of Russia's strategy to divert attention from its occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station in Ukraine. Both sides will point fingers at these false flag blackmails of these nuclear power plants, but I do fail to see how anyone benefits from this at all. If it's a Russian false flag, I don't see how they benefit at all. If it's a Ukrainian false flag on the ZNPP, I don't see the benefit of that. If it's on Kursk, maybe then provocation further with NATO. But I think NATO's made it fairly clear they don't really want much to do with this war as far as people on the ground, maybe closing that border. What would that actually change in the war? Probably not that much. So I do fail to see exactly what is actually the benefit. But let me know, because I may not be seeing what you guys are seeing, as I'm sure that all of you are far more intelligent than I. Now, we're going to go onto the maps and have a look at what is going on. Of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22, the purple, of course, since 14. And these black areas are the areas of the major built-up defense lines. Now, where I want to talk about really first is down on the Dnieper River around Kozachi. Now, Deep State map just hasn't been tracking really anything here, as it has just shown the same as here. Nothing's really changed over the past week or so. But Rybar are saying differently to this. So let's go on to the Rybar Russian sources map, and down here we see Kherson direction, Kozachi, where we're just talking about that this area has come back under this dark red, what means that has been recently reoccupied by the Russian forces. And they have stated Russian troops completely cleared the left bank of the AFU, the Armed Force of Ukraine presence, and established control over the surrounding area. And then they talk about the artillery there. Now, if you've watched me day to day, or you've got to this bloody 20 minutes into the video and you're listening to me, then you know I've talked about that there was reports that Russia was bringing more thermobaric artillery into this area to try and combat these bridgeheads that Ukraine had gained on the left bank of the Dnieper. But no other sources and maps are showing that Russia was successful to drive Ukraine back across to the right bank of the Dnieper River. And of course we see here, this is the ISW as well on the Ukraine Daily Map update. It is still showing that Ukraine hold this area here and down around here and a large part of contested land. So what is actually going there? Well, we're going to have to wait for more maps to come and update. Now, of course, we're on Deep State back here, and the only change we've seen on the Deep State today, and I've gone up and down, is down near Robotyny. Now, we have seen some shifts in here over the past couple of days, and Ukraine make a fair bit of ground. So let's go back to yesterday. Let's jump onto the satellite just to get an idea of where actually Robotyny, the town centre itself, is. So here, and then we step up to today. So Ukraine did make advances to the northwest and the southeast here. So Ukraine did make a fair bit of advancement here and is coming up right onto these first major lines of defensive works here. So there was a big step in there. Now let's go on to then the Ukraine Daily Map and have a look here. So we go back till yesterday and then to today. Now, this doesn't show as much dramatic movement, but it does show directly west here that Ukraine did make a lot of gain in around here, and as well to the east that Ukraine did push its contested grey zone area down further. So he's getting enveloped in, as well as Syriac maps did show that Ukraine had major advancements here, both in the northwest and in the east of Robotyny, shown by this. So they did make a lot of ground. So that goes across all three of those maps. And then we have Warmapper here as well, and this was released very recently. Now, I think Warmapper does show that Russia holds more ground than just to the west than Syriac maps is showing, but as well showing that Ukraine did make a lot of ground on the northwest and to the east then as well. And then, of course, let's have a look on the ISW. And that geolocated footage posted on August 15th indicates that Russian forces exert less control in and around Robotyny. So, as I said yesterday, we will most likely see Robotyny come under complete Ukrainian control in the next couple of days, as Ukraine is making moves there. But up and down the rest of the front line, there are very little or no other movement. The only other map released from today was Warmapper released one around Uruzhany, that Ukraine is exerting more control over Uruzhany itself, and only the very southern outskirt being somewhat in grey zone there. But you can just see where Russia control and where Ukraine is creeping that front line down and down here. So we're looking in and around this area. So we have Uruzhany here is under complete Ukrainian control by the Deep State map. And by the Warmapper map here, still shows a little bit here in the outskirts is on grey zone. So not too much differently. Where the Russian line actually controls is very similar. So that's why we compare different maps. Have a look, see what's going on. But, legends, I hope you're doing well, looking after yourselves. Thanks for the support yesterday on the video. I thought I was going to cop a little bit more shit over that than I did. But if you'd like to support me, there's always links down below, and I really appreciate it, but never feel obliged. I'll speak to you later on. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.